A good Erev Shabbos, a good Erev Yom Adin, as we gather now on the last day of the year. Last day of the year is a wonderful time because whatever we do could correct the entire year. So as we learned this very special segment for the Shabbos table, and actually it's for the Shabbos table of the first Shabbos of the new year, of the first Shabbos of 5784, we thank the Reuben family, who has been our sponsor for this special segment, blasting it out all over the world in 187 countries. And we thank the Reuben family, and it gives us a chance to ask Hashem, in the schus of what they do for us, they should be zeicha to eksiva v'chasima tova u'mesuka in every single way. As we get ready for the Yom Adin, and it might be that you'll be listening to this after Rosh Hashana, which is just as appropriate, a story came my way that I was told was on the wonderful Torah Anytime Daily Dose of Inspiration about, and it's allegedly a true story, a remarkable story. There was a man who had a very unusual living, an unusual way of making a parnasa. There are all kinds of different ways of making parnasa. There are toll collectors, and there are nurses and doctors and dentists and accountants and lawyers and tailors and barbers. This man, unfortunately, was a car thief. That's what he did for a living. He stole cars. He went into strip malls and parks, and when nobody was looking, he hotwired the cars, he stole them, and then he stripped them, and he sold the parts, and he was very good at what he did. He was very nonchalant, and that's the way he made a living. So one day, it was in Eretz Yisrael. One day he went into a busy mall and walked into a car and hotwired the car and started driving away with it. And all of a sudden he hears a noise from the back. He hears a noise from the back. He gets very scared. He turns around, he sees a car seat, and there's a baby whimpering. It was a very hot day, and he took one look at the baby. He didn't have to be a rocket scientist to see that the baby was very severely dehydrated. He must have been left in the car for a very long time. And he didn't have to be a brain surgeon. He saw that the baby was on borrowed time. Now this guy might be a thief, but he was a Jew. He put the accelerator down and he rushed to the nearest emergency room. Grabbing the baby, without thinking, he ran into the emergency room and said the baby was left out in the heat. He didn't give stories, and they rushed the baby in. They gave the baby fluids, and they saved the baby's life. Afterwards, they came out to him. There was no time before, and they said, okay, we need your medical insurance, your papers. And he said, it's not my baby. So he had time to think about a story. And they looked at him quizzically. It's not your baby? He said, look, I was walking in a mall, and I looked in a window, and I saw there was a baby, and I saw that the baby was in tremendous distress. So, I as a kid, I knew how to hotwire a car. Without thinking, I jumped into the car, hot-wired the car, and ran to the closest, emergency room. So they told him, you're a hero. This baby was closer to the next world than this world. You surely saved this young baby's life. You deserve a Medal of Honor. So they went together to the car and looked in the car and looked for the insurance papers, and they tracked down the parents and called the parents. In the meantime, the parents were crazy with worry. They realized their mistake. They ran back to the car. And then the car was missing. They went to the police. And they were right away told, calm down, your baby is fine, a good Samaritan, an amazing hero, found your baby and brought the car to the emergency room in the nick of time, and your baby's going to be all right. So they rush down to the emergency room, and they hug him, and the husband kisses him and says, I got to give you a reward. Whatever you want, ask what you want. You want to get a trip to Switzerland. You want whatever you want. You saved our child. What a heroic thing to do. And he's murmuring, no, I don't need any reward. And he's thinking to himself, Riley, you should only know that you were almost out of a car, And anyway, they said to him, look, if you don't want a reward, at least come to us for Shabbos. We want to host you for a Shabbos. Now, this man is not religious. He never kept Shabbos in his life. And this is the last thing he was really interested. But, he didn't want to do anything suspicious. He knows he's walking on eggshells, His story is a little weak, They might unmask that he's really a car thief and was trying to steal the car. So he came for Shabbos. And to his chagrin, he came Friday night, and for dessert, they invited all their neighbors. And come and meet the hero, come and meet the great person who saved our baby. And he's like, he's like sick of himself. Hero, they should only know, hero, shmiro, they should only know who I really am. And the next morning, they wake him up to come to shul. Now he's carrying on the charade, that he's a good Jew. And shul is not so difficult for an Israeli. They know how to talk Hebrew, so he came to shul. But again, to his chagrin, what goes on? The rabbi gets up and says, we have a hero in our midst, and kol hamatzil nefesh achas b'Yisrael, kilu matzil olam maleh, whoever saves one soul in Klal Yisrael, it's as if he saved the whole world. And, he's shriveling in his boots, they should only know who I really am. And, he suffers through all the hero treatment throughout Shabbos. After Havdalah, the host tells him, look, we're racking our brains how we could show our real gratitude to you. You're so modest, you don't want to accept anything. So we thought of something. There's a big tzaddik in our city this weekend. We got you a coveted appointment to get a blessing from the tzaddik. So here again, he's saying like he needs the blessing of a tzaddik, like a hole in his head. But again, he has to keep up the charade, and he murmurs, "Thank you very much," and he goes and he's ushered into the tzaddik's house. He feels that the tzaddik will see right through him. But the tzaddik also says, I heard what you did. What a wonderful thing you did. As there's nobody around, he finally caves in. He figures he's safe here. And he says to the tzaddik, look, between me and you, I'm not a tzaddik. As a matter of fact, I'm far from a tzaddik. I make my living from stealing cars. And what happened was I was going to steal this car, and I was driving away with it. I found the baby. What am I supposed to do? A baby is dying. I took it to the hospital. But you see, I'm no tzaddik. This whole thing got way blown out of proportion. And the tzaddik looks at him, and he says to him, wow, you're a bigger tzaddik than I thought. He says, I'm living a pretty righteous life all my life. Hashem never gave me the opportunity to save a baby's life. But He gave you this opportunity. You saved the baby. This baby has maybe 100 years, 120 years ahead of him, all because of your quick actions. And you did it even though you could have gotten caught. They could have unmasked you. You would have ended up in jail. And you still did it. So the man started listening and, really? He said, the tzaddik told him, listen to me carefully. Well, I never got a chance in all my life to save a life like you did. The Rebbeinu Shalom only gives you such an opportunity You know, we say, Avinu Malkeinu Kasveinu B'Sefer Zechuyos. Our Father, our King, write us in the Book of Merits. And everybody asks the kasha, what kind of a request is that? If we did merits, we don't have to ask. If we didn't do merits, what does it mean? That Hashem should make up merits? And the answer is, Avinu Malkeinu Kasveinu B'Sefer Zechuyos. We're asking Hashem to give us opportunities. But you know, you don't get an opportunity just like that. So the tzaddik told them, you must have done some other mitzvah, something righteous that Hashem gave you this opportunity. Mitzvah gereres mitzvah. Think about what you do that's special. So the man thought, and then he said, you know, a little bit wryly, you know, there is something I do. The tzaddik might not think it's such a big thing because it's really a big thing out of a bad thing. But when I open a car to steal it, the first thing I do is check the glove compartment and I check the insurance. If I see they have full insurance for theft, then I steal the car. If they don't have insurance for theft, then I don't steal the car. So the tzaddik says, that's it. Even in your Aveiri, you have a Jewish heart. And therefore Hashem gave you an opportunity. You know, when we come to Rosh Hashana, you know, we want to ask ourselves, can I say that this, looking back, is this something I stretch myself? Is this something I do? Maybe when you're tired, you stretch yourself to help your wife, to help a parent. Maybe you go out of your way to visit somebody who's lonely. Maybe you push yourself to learn when you really don't want to learn. You know, think about it. You know, and now, with the new year coming, it's good to take upon ourselves some kind of Kabbalah, some kind of commitment. It doesn't have to be a big commitment, but some kind of a commitment where we could say to Hashem, you know, I'm going to stretch myself with this. You know, and that commitment could make all the difference in the world. You know, I saw in the new sefer that Artsco put out, which was written with Rabbi Besser from the Torah of Rabbi Elimelech Biderman. Rabbi Elimelech Biderman tells a story of an encounter that someone had with his father, the year that he passed away. It was actually 2001. And the man came in before Rosh Hashana, and he asked him, I don't know if it either 2001 or 2000, he asked him, what were you makabel for this year? So the man actually didn't make a Kabbalah. But right there on the spot, he was caught off guard and he was embarrassed. He said, well, this year I'm going to start going to the mikveh every day. And Rabbi Biderman liked that. And he said, that's a good Kabbalah. You should have a ksiva of a chasima toiva. That's a good Kabbalah. And dutifully, man went back to Eretz Yisrael, and he started going to the mikveh every day. One morning, he had an early meeting in Manhattan, and he gets to the train, and then he remembers to his chagrin that he didn't go to the mikveh. So he said, look, everybody could have an off day. And he was about to go on the train, and before the doors closed, he had second thoughts. He jumped backwards, and he said, no, a commitment is a commitment. I got a bracha for ksiva chasima taiva. When the Rebbe heard that commitment, the Rebbe's not here anymore. He's in Shemayim. He leaves and he goes back to the mikveh. That day was 9/11. He had a meeting high up in the Twin Towers, maybe in Cantor Fitzgerald, one of the companies that were above the plains. Everybody else in that meeting perished. But his Kabbalah saved him. It was one Kabbalah. But a person that shows Hashem, we know, Pischuli Pesach, Kechudosh Machat. Open up like the hole of a needle, and I'll make it Kepischli Shel Ulam. Some kind of commitment. It doesn't have to be such a huge commitment. There's a famous story. Many of you might have heard this story, but in context, it's kedai to repeat. The famous story that a soldier was hitchhiking one Erev Shabbos, and it was pretty late, and from a Yid stops and says, "Where do you have to go?" So he says, "I have to go to Beersheba." So Beersheba was an hour away, and the man said, "Look, I can't go to Beersheba. It's Shabbos soon. But I'm going to Netanya. I see you're a soldier, probably have off the weekend. Why don't you come to our house? I see that you're not dati, but my wife makes a killer cholent. She makes a killer babka, and you'll have a really nice time. It'll be an adventure." So the man was free spirit and adventurous, and he says, "You're on." So he goes home, and the host was true to his word. His wife was such a cook. I mean, the gefilte fish and the soup, and there was carp, and there was a roast, and it was. And the next morning, his host wakes him up, and he says, "Come to shul. You'll enjoy it." The rabbi says a nice sermon. You're Israeli. You know the words. You could daven. You could follow along. So he came. And the meal, the cholent, whoa, there was cholent and all kinds of cold cuts, and it was, what a cake at the end of the meal. It was amazing. And then they all went out for a pleasant walk afterwards, and he took a nap. It was, and then Shabbos was over, and they made Havdalah, and the soldier was about to leave. And the host says to him, "Potter b'loy klum I efsher." Just can't leave like that. So the soldier started getting nervous, and he thought maybe they want money from him. And he says, "Do I owe you something?" So he says, No, chas v'shalom. It's just that you experienced the whole Shabbos of Torah and Yiddishkeit. You just can't leave just like that. So the soldier got defensive, and he said, I told you I'm not religious. The culture is beautiful and it's nostalgic, but this is not who I am. So he says, yes, but you know what? Here's a Kitzer Shulchan Aruch. Thumb through it, accept something. So the man, to humor him, he opens it up, and he opens it up to getting dressed in the morning. He opens it up, and he says, you should put on your right shoe first, and then the left shoe, and then tie the left shoe, and then tie the right shoe. You put on the right first because Hashem gave the Torah from the right, but you tie the left shoe because the tefillin is tied on the left hand. So the man said, this I could do. This I could do. So the host grimaced, and this isn't exactly what he had in mind, that the person should leave with a taste of Yiddishkeit. Okay, but what can he do? This is what he wants. He said, at least he'll be a Jew on how he puts on his shoes. So he says, okay. So the man leaves, and dutifully and loyally, he accepted. He was a man of his word. Every day he put on his right shoe, his left shoe, he tied his left shoe, he tied his right shoe. He goes back to the army base, and then one morning, there was a siren early in the morning. There was an attack, and all hands were at the tanks. And he, of course, without thinking, got into his uniform, his shoes, and he gets to the tank, and he's about to jump on, and then he realizes he didn't put on his shoes right. He said, well, is that ridiculous? That's what I'm thinking about now. He says, no, a commitment is a commitment. He gets off, he says, I'll take the next tank. He sits down and he puts on his shoes properly, and he jumps on the next tank. The tank that he was supposed to go on hit a mine, was blown up, and all hands were lost. He was saved. This man now is a religious Jew with a religious family in Bnei Brak, because he made a commitment. The Rebbeinu Shalom wants us to make, remember we always say, we don't just want another year. We want a better year. So Hashem says, okay, tell me how you're going to be better. You want a better year? Tell me how you're going to be better. I want to tell you that tonight, we're going to dip the apple in the honey. So first of all, you have to know that an apple, a tapuach, is the same letters as Priseach. Priseach means that Hashem opens his hands. We ask for a Shana Tova Masuka, a good and sweet year. If our parnasa is good, that leads to a sweet year. We're not worried about money. We're able to buy what I need. We're able to get our wife cleaning help, that she should have a sweeter life. We could go a little bit on a vacation. We could travel and have a little chayfish. You know, that's sweet. We have to realize that on Rosh Hashana, Hashem decides our parnasa. People sometimes really spend inordinate amounts of time on their parnasa. They say that they have to work to make a living. But we get our yearly stipend on Rosh Hashana. So you'll say, so then you mean everybody that goes to work is stupid? No. They have to do a shtadlus. They have to make the attempt, right? We're given a certain amount of life, but if we're going to drive without our eyes closed, we're not going to get that life. Right? We have to make the proper attempt. But, here's a big but. But we're not supposed to make excessive ishtadlus. We're not supposed to work harder than we have to. We're not supposed to do ishtadlus and not go to minyan. We're not supposed to do ishtadlus and be derelict in our responsibilities to our spouse. That's excessive. They say a story. It's an interesting story. Rav Tversky says this story. Rav Tversky says, he says there was in a city neighbors. One was the biggest miser in the town, and the next door neighbor was an amazing philanthropist, a big machnesayr. So a poor man came to the city, and unfortunately he walked into the miser's house first, and he asked him for tzedakah. So the man said, go into the back, chop the wood for me, and I'll give you then a good meal, and I'll give you lodging for the night. And so the man went in the back, and it was hot, and he chopped for 3 hours. He chopped all the wood. The miser went in the back. He smiled. He said, good job. Now go next door. My men over there will give you a good meal and lodging. He goes next door, and true to his word, they gave him an unbelievable hot meal, stuffed cabbage and soup and cake. He never tasted such delicious food in his life. And then they gave him a key to a room, and he had a good sleep. And a few days later, he was talking to one of his friends, and he said, you know, I chopped some wood. I worked for 3 hours, but boy, was it worth it. And the man smiled and said, you've been duped. The house next door has nothing to do with the miser. If you would have gone there first, you would have got all of that without chopping the wood. And the moral is that sometimes people work excessively hard and drive themselves crazy, but they would have gotten it anyway. They only had to do the normal, average ishtadlus. And we ask Hashem, we dip the apple in the honey, we say, Hashem, give us a good sweet year. Now, good sometimes could come in a wrapper. It's good for us, but it's a harsh wrapper. Sometimes people learn to appreciate things from a bad experience. We want it to be good. We also want it to be sweet. And that's what I, again, want to wish the Rubin family for granting us this incredible opportunity to have another shir for the Shabbos table. And we're also sponsored, this particular shir is also sponsored by an anonymous donor who usually sponsors my last shir of the year and my first shir of the new year. And she missed the letting me know by the Wednesday night share, Thursday night on Torah Anytime. So she's also sponsoring this share. And let me again take the opportunity as the last embers of Tafshin Pei Gimel leave us, that we should be Zaycha to have a Tafshin Pei Dalid with no hospital visits except to have babies, with no scares, with good sleeps, with sweet shalom bayis, great nachas, wonderful learning, all kinds of happiness and menuchas nefesh to serve Hashem in hatzlach and ruchnius and gashmius, ad bias gil tzedek b'mher v'yameinu. Have a good Shabbos and a good and productive and wonderful Yom Adin. We were all written in the Sifrei Chaim Shel Tzadikim, L'shana Tova Mesukra.